Welcome to the How Did They Do It Real Estate Podcast. Have you ever wondered how people succeed in real estate and what steps they took to get there? If so, this podcast is for you. Your hosts, Sayla and Eileen Prack, interview top experts in the real estate community to share with you their real estate journey and how they achieved massive success. Our goal is to provide you with valuable real estate resources and to help you apply it to your own real estate goal.
Thank you everyone for joining in today on the How Did They Do It Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Sayla Prack. Today, I am greatly honored to have Marty Boardman to join us as a guest today. So Marty, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So Marty, so for our listeners, can you give us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to our listeners and what do you do and how you get started with real estate to begin with?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Marty Boardman and I got into real estate investing back in 2002. So I've been at this through some incredible peaks and valleys. My primary strategy in real estate investing is fixing and flipping houses and also buying distressed properties that I can buy and hold and add to my rental property portfolio. But I guess what makes me unique and different, and the reason why you probably had me on the show is because my expertise really is in the foreclosure space, pre-foreclosures, and buying properties at trustee sales in states where it's a non-judicial process for foreclosure, and buying houses at sheriff sales where states have a judicial process for foreclosure. So that's really what I've been doing as my primary acquisition strategy since I got started in 2002, probably over 1,000 foreclosure deals, pre-foreclosure deals, and auction deals. And I actually wrote a book about it last year called Foreclosure Secrets. I've been a featured writer for biggerpockets.com. I was actually their very first podcast guest going back 10 years ago when they first started. And I don't know how many bazillion podcasts they've done now, but I was podcast guest number one. So that's kind of a feather in my cap. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And I buy and fix and flip foreclosures and own, buy and hold in Arizona and Wisconsin. Those are two states that I do it, but I have bought foreclosures in multiple states all over the country.
Wow, that's amazing, Marty. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to have you coming on today. And I want to learn more about the foreclosure secret. How do you do it? And just to begin, take a step back. What does it mean by foreclosure properties to begin with for our listener who's tuning in for the first time?
So to break it down, there are really three phases of foreclosure. There is the pre-foreclosure phase, which is the window of time, the period of time from when the owner of the house is first notified that they're being foreclosed on by their bank or their lender. And this is usually done through a notice of default, a notice of trustee sale, a notice of foreclosure. But when the homeowner is first notified that the bank is taking foreclosure action against them or starting foreclosure proceedings against them, the period of time from when they're first notified about it until the actual day of the auction is what we call in the business a pre-foreclosure. Now, there could be anywhere between 30 days and 2 years from when the homeowner is first notified the bank's going to foreclose on them and the auction date, depending upon what state you live in. So it all varies state by state. For example, in Arizona, when the lender files a notice of trustee sale, the borrower, the owner of the house, has 90 days to bring their loan current or pay their loan off, or the house sells at auction on that 91st day. In Wisconsin, where I also buy foreclosures, it's a judicial process. So there's courts and there's attorneys involved, and things can really get drug out. I've seen notice of foreclosure filings made in Wisconsin that had auction dates that weren't for 2 or 3 years down the road. So it really just depends on where you live. But that period of time between when that notice is filed and the actual auction date is what we call a pre-foreclosure. Then there's the actual auction, and that could be called a trustee sale, could be called a sheriff sale, depending upon where you live. And you can go to these auctions, and they're typically at a county courthouse or they're in an attorney's office, and you can bid on the house. And if you're the highest bidder, then you are the new owner of the property. So that's the auction phase, the second phase of foreclosure. If no one shows up at the auction or no third-party investor bids on it on the day of the auction, then it ends up in the hands of the bank and it becomes what we call an REO, or real estate owned. So those are your three phases of foreclosure. And I like to say that all 50 states have a different legal process for how this plays out, whether it's done by state statute, which would be what we call a non-judicial state, or it's done through the courts, and that's what we call a judicial state. And so I think it's split like 27 states are non-judicial and 23 are judicial, or vice versa. I can't remember off the top of my head what the breakdown is. But each state has their own process for how they facilitate a foreclosure. And I like to say this, and you're in Los Angeles, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. We have a lot of Mexican food restaurants where we live, right?
Right.
And I tell people all the time, I love Mexican food and I love salsa. And there's probably 50 different Mexican restaurants within 10 miles of my house. And I could go to all 50 of them and they have a different flavor of salsa, right?
Right.
Well, that's how the foreclosure process is in all 50 states. Each state has its own flavor, if you will, of how the process works. And it's up to you if you want to learn how to buy foreclosures in your state, to learn how that process works, how the notification process works, how the auctions work, so you can figure out the best strategy to implement to start buying and acquiring foreclosures, and either buying them to live in if you want to make them a personal residence, or if you want to fix and flip it, buy and hold it, wholesale it, whatever. Figure out what that process is so you can implement the proper strategy.
So as for you, Marty, in Arizona, for pre-foreclosures process, so you mentioned at the beginning that you like to buy pre-foreclosure property. What are some of the strategy that you can make a recommendation or suggest that someone who wanted to get started to actually find these properties? So obviously they are not publicly advertised, right? These type of properties.
Well, yes and no. I mean, every county, it's up to the individual county to publish that information, the notice of default, the notice of foreclosure, whatever your county calls it. So, and some counties are very advanced as far as technology goes, and will publish these notices on their website. For example, where I live in Maricopa County, the Maricopa County Recorder's Office publishes these notices trustee sales in real time. So as we're sitting here today, could be as many as 15 or 20 notices recorded today. We average here in Maricopa County about 100 to 125 new trustee sale filings a week, about 450 to 500 a month. And those are all published online. So I could go online right now and do a search for notice of trustee sales recorded today. And there's probably 8 or 10 of them that will show up. So not every county is the same. I mean, some counties don't do anything online. You have to go to a third-party service or a newspaper, or actually physically go down to the county courthouse to get that information. But I like to tell people, the harder it is to get the information, the better, because that means less competition for you. I mean, pre-foreclosure competition here in Maricopa County, where I live, is pretty fierce. So, because the information is so easy to get. So I like to say the harder, the better. In Wisconsin, for example, where I also buy foreclosures, the county sheriff's offices, because these are sheriff sales, the sheriff's department conducts the sales. The county sheriffs each have their own website where you can download their notice of foreclosure. So the easier it is to get the information and download it, again, the more competition you're going to have, but it does make it easier for you to track foreclosures and to figure out when the auction is going to take place, figure out how much the person who's in foreclosure, how much they owe on their mortgage currently, so on and so forth. So those are all things that you can usually find online through either your county or through a third-party service. I would just say this to your listeners, to everyone listening today. I'm very distrustful of third-party companies that aggregate foreclosure data, because it is pretty difficult to get, in that it's difficult to automate a system that can basically scrape information from these county court records and dump them into an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, if you look at Maricopa County, where I live, for example, the notice of trustee sale is a scanned PDF document that you look up. And it's pretty difficult to write a software program that can scrape that information and pull out a date, a time, the name of the owner, the address of the property. So this all has to be done manually. And from what I found, most of the third-party companies that offer foreclosure lists, these lists are very outdated or inaccurate. So you end up wasting a lot of time and money trying to contact people who may not even be in foreclosure anymore. So I always say go directly to the source, and that's your county courthouse.
That makes sense. And what type of condition of all these properties that you notice during your real estate journey or purchasing these properties?
So I'll just give you an example of the last two properties I bought so far in 2023. I'll tell you about the first two I bought in 2023. So first one I bought in 2023 was a complete gut job. I mean, the house was a disaster. It needed pretty much everything. It needed a new roof. It needed new windows, flooring, kitchen cabinets. And we had to gut the house and basically do a $75,000, $85,000 rehab. It was in really poor condition, but we got a killer deal on it. We bought it for $200,000 and it's worth $450,000. So we got an exceptional deal on the property. So knowing a full-blown rehab was not a big deal. The second property I bought was located in a town called Buckeye, Arizona. And most of the homes in Buckeye, Arizona are new construction. They've all been built in the last 15 to 17 years. The house is in excellent condition. Everything's like new. I mean, the only thing we're going to have to do when the seller moves out of the house is paint and maybe put in some new flooring. So it really just depends on the owner of the house, the age of the house, how well the previous owner took care of the house, how much updating they did or didn't do. It really just depends on the seller. I mean, the thing about it is with foreclosure that most people, I think, don't necessarily understand is that homeowners in foreclosure are going through a lot of emotion, right? And you have to be able to kind of meet them where they are at. And it could be they're confused, they're in denial, they're angry, or they're apathetic. And I like to say they're any one of the four. And in my book, Foreclosure Secrets, I talk about the four kind of traits or emotions that a homeowner foreclosure is in. And sometimes that can lead to them letting the house fall into disrepair and become in very poor condition. Or it could be the opposite. It could be that it motivates them to keep the house up. I mean, it's just really hard to know, but what kind of emotional state that they're in. But typically they need help and they need someone who's capable of explaining to them what their options are and kind of meeting them where they're at in that situation, creating a win-win. And so, I mean, the alternative for somebody who's in foreclosure that doesn't sell to an investor like me is the house sells at auction. They get no money because the person who buys it at the auction is under no obligation to give them cash before closing or after closing. So they get no money. Their house goes to sell at auction. Their credit is destroyed, and they don't really have any time to move out. Typically, when an investor buys a property at an auction, they can have the former owner is now considered a squatter and is there illegally. They can have them evicted in a very short period of time. So they get thrown out of the house. You provide them with cash. At closing, preferably you're giving them some kind of money. I always like to give a seller in foreclosure some money when we sign the agreement, and then again when they move out. So they have money to find a new place to live, and they have money to hire a moving truck. And I hold a little bit back so that they are motivated to move out. And I usually don't give them more than 30 to 60 days to do that. But that's a much better option than, so they get money at closing, they get money when they move out, they get time to move out, and they don't have a foreclosure on their credit report. Those are all much better scenarios than letting the house sell at auction. So, because again, their credit's destroyed, they get no money and they get thrown out. And it's a very traumatic thing for them to have happen. So I guess that's a long answer to your question. But the cool thing about buying pre-foreclosures is when you're dealing directly with the seller in foreclosure and you've built a relationship and have rapport with them, you have time to walk through the house. You may have a short period of time to get the deal closed, but you at least can go in and see it. The risk is when you go to the auction and someone's living in the house, they're not going to let you in. They're not going to go, sure, yeah, You can't show up at their door and go, hey, I want to buy your house at the auction tomorrow. Can I have a tour? They're not going to do that. So the luxury of buying pre-foreclosures and dealing directly with a seller in foreclosure is you do have some time to do a little bit of due diligence. You may have to close really quick, but at least you can see what you're getting yourself into.
Well, that's amazing of how you yourself and your company is actually like reaching out to the foreclosure sellers and then try to find an options for them that actually win-win situation for them as well. That's really nice of what you do. So thank you. And for this property, so you're talking about another thing that I want to talk about is the finance side of it. How does the process work? Is it the same thing as buying a normal property or is it different?
Well, I mean, it could be the same, but typically, and I'll give you kind of, the name of my book is Foreclosure Secrets. And one of the secrets I'll give you that I share in the book of many and is that homeowners in foreclosure don't typically respond to traditional marketing that most investors do. It's been my experience, homeowners in foreclosure typically don't respond to direct mail. They typically don't respond to text message blasts that a lot of investors, real estate investors are implementing as part of their marketing strategy right now. They certainly don't drive around and look for bandit signs or, we buy houses signs and call numbers on bandit signs. They don't do that. And it's pretty unlikely they're even going to go online and do a search for a house buyer or a home buyer. So your SEO marketing campaigns and strategies don't work with homeowners in foreclosure typically because, again, they are confused, they're in denial, they're apathetic, or they're angry. So those aren't really marketing strategies that are that effective with homeowners in foreclosure. So what I teach my coaching clients in my coaching program and what I talk about in my book is don't be first with a homeowner in foreclosure. In other words, what a lot of investors do is as soon as a notice of foreclosure or notice of trustee sale is filed, and the investor downloads that information, they're immediately starting to market to that homeowner in foreclosure. And at this point in time, the homeowner in foreclosure has options, right? If they have 30, 60, 90 days or more until the auction date, they're probably not going to sell to you as an investor at a discount because they have other options. I mean, they have 30 days plus, they could list the house with a realtor. They could possibly refinance. They could maybe get a second loan on the house. They could just find an investor who doesn't really care about getting a good deal and sell the house with traditional financing. So what I teach my clients to do is don't be first, be last. Don't start your marketing to a homeowner in foreclosure until they have 30 days or less until their auction date. Because at this point, they've run out of options. They can't sell to a traditional buyer because they don't have enough time to get a mortgage or a loan and close on the deal. They can't refinance or get a second because 30 days isn't enough time for the underwriting process. And most investors aren't capable of closing a deal in under 30 days because they have to get a hard money loan or a private money loan, and that requires some underwriting. So I teach my clients to start marketing after when there's only 30 days or less left and continue marketing into them right up until 24 hours before the auction. And in that case, the financing with a pre-foreclosure deal is subject to financing. So what I suggest is you don't go out and get a big chunk of cash and pay off the seller's mortgage and stop the foreclosure. You take title to the house subject to the existing mortgage. And instead of paying it off, you just bring the loan current. So you get what's called a reinstatement figure from the lender. So you give the lender the money that is needed to bring the loan current, which would include past due payments on the mortgage or the loan, past due or interest that's been accrued, late penalties, interest, and legal fees. So you take title subject to the existing mortgage on the house, you bring the loan current, you stop the auction, now you own the house, and the underlying mortgage remains in place. So that's the fastest and best way to get cheap financing and stop a foreclosure with someone rather than coming up with cash or trying to hustle around and get a hard money loan.
Wow, that's amazing tips right there. So I want to dive into your book as well, The Secret of Foreclosures. So we're talking about some of the things on your books already, including the seller trades. You give the best recommendations on how to get the finance side of things. Is there anything else that you can share with our listeners for your book?
Sure. So the thing that I think, I would like for everyone to know, not just people listening to your podcast, but I get this, and I talk about this in my book, and I hear this a lot from people who want to get into real estate investing, especially people who want to break into the real estate investment business and do wholesaling. You hear this over and over again. I keep hearing this over and over again. You've got to build a cash buyers list. You got to have a cash buyers list before you can start wholesaling real estate. And I think that's terrible advice. What you need to know how to do is find really good deals. And that once you master the skill of finding below market deals, you don't have to worry about money. Like if you get a killer deal, and it doesn't have to be a house in foreclosure, it just could be a killer deal. If you can get that deal under contract, now you've got a contract that you can market. So I get people who reach out to me all the time. They're like, hey, can I put you on my cash buyers list? I'm like, well, do you have any deals? Well, no, I'm just building my cash buyers list. I'm like, listen, I'm not giving you my name and my phone number and my email address on the off chance that you find a good deal. Like, go out, bring me a good deal, and prove to me you know what a good deal looks like and that you can put one together. Then we'll talk, right? So one of the things I talk about in my book is people who are kind of in this mode of getting ready to get ready. I meet aspiring real estate investors all the time who are getting ready to get ready. They are busy doing things like starting an LLC and getting an EIN number. They're building out a website. They're having business cards made. They're going to all these different networking events. They're doing all the stuff that doesn't matter if you don't have the skill set to find good deals, lock them up. I mean, you need to learn how to be a real estate investor first. All this other stuff, to me, it's like trying to open a medical practice without learning how to become a doctor first, right? You can't open a medical practice if you don't have any training to be a doctor. I mean, if you don't know how to diagnose a patient's symptoms, you can't prescribe medicine to cure whatever it is that's making them sick because you don't have any training. You don't have any medical training. So all this other stuff, it's like people trying to start, a real estate investor who's trying to do all these things like create an LLC and gain an EIN number and, trying to build a cash buyers list. And, I talked to a guy the other day who was like trying to build a rehab team, or get a contractor on his team to help him estimate rehab costs for his wholesale deals. I'm like, well, have you done any deals yet? And he's like, no. I'm like, you're not going to find a contractor who's going to coach you through or teach you how to estimate rehab costs when you don't even have a deal. They're not going to waste that kind of time with you on the hope or the off chance you find one. I'm like, forget about all that. Learn how to find good deals in your market, get them locked up. And again, my preferred method is pre-foreclosures. So go out, get your list of pre-foreclosures, go start talking to homeowners in foreclosure, make a deal with them, get it under contract. Then you can start building your cash buyers list. I mean, that's what I did. When I got started, I went out and I found a house in Mesa, Arizona, about 30 minutes from where I live right now. And I talked to the homeowner who was in foreclosure. He had about 2 weeks until his auction. I made a deal with him, got the house under contract. And then now this is 2003. Okay. So this is before Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, right? So I got the house under contract. I put an ad in a little tiny local newspaper in this area of Mesa. It's called the East Valley Tribune. And that newspaper came out, I think, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I ran a 3-day ad in the paper with the cross streets of the house, the square footage of the house, bedroom, bathroom count. And I said, I'm selling this house for $115,000. If you're interested, I'm doing an open house on Monday or whatever day it was. So I had like 12 to 15, somewhere around there, investors all show up at the same time. They were all interested in it. I wrote down their names and their phone numbers, and boom, I had a cash buyers list, right? 12 to 15 investors. That's it. Then whichever one, I don't know which one bought the house from me, but there was 2 other guys who were really interested. After that, for the next 3 years when I was wholesaling, those 3 people on that buyer's list of 15 bought every single deal I had.
Wow.
So it was like, people make such a big deal out of all this stuff. Well, you got to have money. You got to have a buyer's list. You got to have a network. You got to have contractors. You got to have realtors. You got to have websites and business cards. That's a bunch of crap. It's BS. You're getting ready to get ready. Go out and make a deal. Go find a deal. And like I said, if it's pre-foreclosure, great. If it's just through your own marketing efforts, through direct mail, bandit signs, text message blasting, driving for dollars, whatever it is, figure out what a good deal looks like, or how to structure a good deal, how to lock it up, negotiate with the seller, and then you can worry about all this other stuff. Like, but Marty, I don't have an LLC. Who cares? You can do your first deal in your personal name. You're not going to get sued, most likely. Maybe you'll pay a little more in taxes, but who cares? Prove to yourself and to others you're capable of being a deal maker first. Then you can go out and start spending money and time on networking and cash buyers lists and fancy websites and all this other. So anyway, that's I'm off my soapbox now. So
wow, that's amazing. That's golden nuggets right there, Marty. Sharing all your life experience on this, like finding a good deal first. So now my next questions for that: what is considered as a good deal? Especially, I know it's like every market is different, but for you, if you're finding a deal, how do you consider that's a good deal and I should do it?
So I'll give you an example. One of the 2 deals I just talked about, both were great. So you have to be able to have some idea of what it's going to cost to repair something, right? I mean, you have to have some general idea, but even then, you just have to be close. It's like playing horseshoes, right? You just have to be close. I mean, you don't have to be on the nose, spot on with your budget. But the deal I told you about, that was a total gut job. Listen, I went on, not that Zillow is an accurate way to comp houses or Truly or some of these others, but I bought a house in pre-foreclosure that had a Zillow estimate of $435,000, and I bought it for $200,000. And the house was a complete mess, but it was in a good neighborhood, close to in a really good school district, next to a park. So, I mean, it's not like it was in a bad location. Location was great. It was just a really dumpy house, right? That needed a lot of work. But there's $220,000 in margin in it, right? So that's a good deal. I mean, if you bring any investor like me a property that has a market value of $425 to $450, and you say, hey, I'll sell it to you for $225, I mean, that's 50 cents on the dollar. Just about anybody's going to buy that house, right? So that's a good deal. I mean, no one would disagree that that's a killer deal. So let's just say I was going to wholesale that house. I'm all in for say 200,000. Man, I could probably wholesale it, go up to 250, 275, and still leave enough meat on the bone for the cash buyer who's going to fix and flip it to get a really nice payday. So, and that's the thing I see like a lot with guys and gals who are getting into wholesaling, and they're so concentrated and fixated on creating a cash buyers list. They're really not trying to create a cash buyers list or build a cash buyers list. They're trying to build a cash suckers list, right? The cash suckers list is just a bunch of people who don't really know what market values are. They don't really know how much it costs to rehab something. They got some money and they wanted to get into fixing and flipping, or they want to buy another rental. And so they get on all these lists of people who send them these crappy deals that they don't really know are crappy, because the wholesaler is really good about overinflating the comps or underestimating rehab costs. So the cash sucker buys the house and tries to flip it and loses money or barely breaks even, or they buy it because they're trying to rent it out, but their numbers don't work. They can't do the BRRRR strategy because it appraises way lower than they think. And now they're in a negative cash flow situation, or they're just stuck in a deal they can't refinance out of, right? So really what people are doing is they're building cash suckers lists. And so now you don't have, as a wholesaler, you can't create or do repeat business with a buyer if every single buyer you're trying to sucker them out of their money and get them to overpay for a deal. So you can't continue to just have an ongoing business relationship with that cash buyer. You're either getting a crappy deal yourself to begin with, or you're trying to take all the profit for yourself and not leave enough meat on the bone for the cash buyer. So it's hard to sustain a wholesaling business when you're doing that to people over and over. You're just basically doing one-off deals with new investors as they join your cash suckers list, right? So anyway, but a good deal is just a deal where you at least leave enough meat on the bone. If you're wholesaling, where you at least leave enough meat on the bone for the cash buyer to make, 12 to 15% of what they invested in the project or into the property. But I have another one. The other deal I told you about that doesn't need a lot of work. It's worth $400,000, between $375 and $400, and I bought it for $275.
Right.
And it's basically $5,000. It's paint and flooring. That's it. So that's a killer deal. There's over $100,000 in margin, right, in the project. So that's a killer deal. So if you can learn how to go out and make deals like that, right? I mean, you know what a good, you don't have to know what a good deal is to know that that's a good deal, right? You're like,
right.
The house is worth $400 and you can buy it for $275 and it needs maybe $5,000 in rehab. That's a killer deal. If the house is worth $450 and you can buy it for $200 and it needs $100,000 rehab, that's a killer deal, right? Any deal where you can walk away making almost six figures is a killer deal. Now, maybe you're not capable of doing something like that right out of the gate, but you at least have to know enough about your real estate market to know that house is worth this. And if I can buy it for this, virtually anyone can make money with this deal, right? So that's what I'm talking about. It's like, that's what it takes. And that's really essentially what I help my clients do who don't know how to do this, is listen, here's why this is a good deal and here's why it isn't, right? So, but in seasoned pros like me, good deals jump off the paper at them. The problem is there just aren't that many good deals, and there certainly aren't very many people who know how to put good deals together, right?
Yep. So another thing, sometimes purchasing the property, something like this, the rehab budget is probably one of the most difficult things to estimate, right? Do you have any recommendation on making sure that a buyer knows how to estimate the rehab properly, or at least like a rule of thumb, or how would you let your client knows the best practice on that?
So I'll say this, if you don't have any construction experience, if you don't have any experience fixing and flipping houses or rehabbing houses, it is a very difficult thing to learn how to do all by yourself, because it's unlikely that an experienced general contractor, project manager, or really anyone who knows about construction is going to walk through a house with you and give you a line-by-line estimate of how much it's going to cost to rehab it. So that's very difficult to do. Secondly, and a lot of new investors try to do this, where they will just call up various contractors and ask them pricing for how much do you charge for this? How much do you charge for that? And contractors are very reluctant to price out hypothetical houses, right? They're like, well, I mean, every house is different, right? I mean, like I'm rehabbing a house right now that was built in like 1984. I've got one in Milwaukee I'm working on that was built in like 1912, right? I mean, it's very difficult for a contractor to give you even ballpark estimates if they don't have a house they can actually see. So contractors don't like to do that. So there's really one of two ways you can do it. You could hire a general contractor and pay them, or somebody who's got experience, pay them to walk through houses or kind of walk you through how the estimating process works. You can find someone like me and hire them to coach you through that process, or you can just wing it and just hope that you get it right and go ahead and close on the house, buy the house, and then come in and start having your contractors through and give you estimates. And frankly, I've done all three of those things. And the best way I learned was option number 2, which was getting a coach who's a practicing real estate investor to let me learn from him on how those projects go. I mean, I've had to wing it before, like when I started in Wisconsin, fixing and flipping houses. I had experience here and I knew what material costs and labor costs were here, but I didn't know what that pricing would be in Wisconsin. So the first couple of deals I did there, I made money, but not as much money as I did after that. And so I tell people sometimes with this, you have to kind of go into it with the long game approach, or the long. Right. It's like, well, listen, I want to do multiple fix and flips. So the understanding is I may not make as much money on the first couple. I may even break even, but along the way, I'll know what contractors to hire, which ones not to hire, and I'll know how to refine my process and get better after I do each deal. Because that's the thing. A lot of people go into a fix and flip, or even a house that they're planning just to remodel and rent out with the rosiest of expectations, like I'm going to make all this money. It's like, no, just go into it with the attitude that if I don't lose money, then this was a win, because I've learned how the process works. I've learned, I've got some good contractors I want to work with on the next house. I've got some I definitely don't want to work with the next time. Right. So yeah, I mean, I would say the two most difficult things about this business are being able to accurately determine the after repair value of the property and being able to accurately estimate rehab costs. Those are the two hardest things to do. So again, 3 ways you can hire somebody, a professional, to come in and tell you that what the costs are going to be. You could get somebody, a coach or a mentor like me, that can teach you how to do it, or you could just try to figure it out on your own. So
I totally agree, Marty. Like before our recording, I shared with you that we're also looking for houses to flip here in California as well. And one of the things, very difficult things to do here is competition is fierce, and also the margin is not that much, and also the repairing cost estimate is probably one of the most difficult things to get it really accurate. So Marty, thank you so much for sharing all the golden nuggets and all the advices on this. You mentioned about coaching program. So can you let our listener know about your coaching program? How does it work? If somebody wanted to work with you, how would that go?
So yeah, I call it, actually, because there's really, I feel like in this space, right? There's coaches and there's mentors, and typically coaching programs, in my experience, are typically programs where the actual person teaching the material, well, the person who's in the program as the student or the client doesn't get a lot of direct interaction with the coach, right? There's some big name coaches out there, and even, maybe not as well-known coaches who have teams of people that work under them that they train, so that there's very little one-on-one actual interaction between the client or the student and the coach, right? So I kind of have, my idea of a coaching program is really more of a program where the person that's created all the content doesn't have a lot of interaction with the student or the client. So I like to consider what I do to be more mentorship, and everything I do is one-on-one. And I typically work with 5 clients at a time. And I really have 3 levels of mentorship that I do. I have a top level program where I meet, or the client comes to me where I am in Phoenix. We shadow for a couple of days, and then I will go to their market. In addition to that, they have unlimited direct access to me, my courses, group coaching calls, my lenders, all that stuff. And then the next level is a program where they can just come here for 2 days. I don't go to their market. And then all of the same things we discussed. And then just my lower, the third tier of the program is unlimited access, direct access to me, and then weekly group coaching calls. But the object or the end game for all 3 levels of my program, my mentorship is to get my clients a foreclosure deal in 30 days of working together. And I work with my clients for 6 months, but we sit down and we map out a 30-day marketing strategy for their business. We do an onboarding call, get to know them, figure out what their strengths and weaknesses and their resources are. I give them access to my foreclosure researcher to build out their foreclosure list. We come up with a plan, and we vet all of that out through the marketing, with the object being that we get them a deal in the first 30 days. And again, that's done through access to me, to my researcher, to my course. I have a course also that accompanies all the one-on-one training. So yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, my last client who I put in my program, he did his first pre-foreclosure deal in 7 days, in a week. So, I mean, some people it takes longer, it takes a month or 2, but yeah, that's the end game. So, yeah.
Yep. Thank you so much, Marty. And last but not least, I always ask these questions. Now we in 2023, we got a lot of mixed communication with the Fed, with the market. And how do you feel about 2023 housing market is heading to? Are we having a potential downturn? What do you? I know we don't have a magic ball, but what your thought on that?
Well, I mean, there's already more than enough evidence that would indicate that we are in a changing or shifting market. I mean, values are down. If you look at the Case-Shiller home price index, you look at data in your market, wherever you may be listening to right now, chances are home values have dropped where you live probably 5 to 10% or more.
Yep.
I saw a report I love Housing Wire. It's one of my favorite sources for housing related news. And their main economist, Logan, I can never pronounce his last name, Matsushima, I think his name is, or Mahatashi, or I can't think of his last name. I always butcher his last name. He's already kind of forecasting anywhere between an 8 and 12% correction. I saw Adam Data Services said that Phoenix was going to see a 25% price correction in 2023. And right now, I think we're at like 10 to 12%. So there's more than enough data to support that we're in a decline. However, I don't think there will be a crash. I think we're obviously in a housing market recession, but I don't think there is going to be a crash. And the reason why is people actually have equity in their homes. Mm-hmm. People have fixed rate mortgages under 4%. Most people do, and have affordable payments. So I don't see how there could be another housing market crash. However, the Fed keeps sticking their nose into this thing. And I just checked, and rates are almost at 7%. And that really has put a damper on purchase money mortgage applications. So there's not a lot of demand, but there's also not a lot of inventory either. So something's got to give. But I think in 2023, we'll probably see the first half of 2023, more declines in values. We've already seen foreclosures increase. I mean, foreclosures in 2022 were up 57% from 2021. Foreclosure completions were up 65%. But I always tell people, no matter what's going on in the economy, there's always going to be foreclosures, always. There's probably going to be more now than there were in 2020, 2021. And what's great about it is if you're an investor and you know what you're doing, you can be buying properties and getting great deals because people actually have equity. It's not like when the housing market crashed before and everybody was underwater, because you couldn't do pre-foreclosure deals then because people didn't have any equity. Now they do. So there's a tremendous opportunity, I think, in the pre-foreclosure space. But I still don't think that means that we're going to see a housing market crash. And I do think in the second half of 2023, I think we're going to see interest rates get down back into the 5s again. Once the Fed, I don't know, I just wish they'd get out of this and just get the rates down to 5.5%. And I think you'll start seeing people buy again because, people still need a place to live. It's just, I think they raised rates way too fast. I mean, they more than doubled in 6 months. It's ridiculous. They should have just gone from 3 to 5, go from 3 to 7 if you have to, but at least drag it out over 12 to 18 months. But for some reason, they think that that's the only way to curb inflation. I don't know, just aggravates me. Oh, we got to put people out of work so that we can bring down inflation. It's like, listen, everybody's working. Like, I don't know. That's probably a topic for another day, right?
Yep. Marty, thank you so much for coming on to the show today to talk about some of the secrets of the foreclosures, about your book, about giving us a lot of advices, which I find very, very valuable. And I'm so happy that we have these conversations, and I'm pretty sure our listeners find a lot of values in this episode. And also talking about your coaching program as well. If somebody wanted to reach out and learn more about you or want to participate in your investments or participate in your coaching program or reading about your book, where can they go?
So the book itself, it's real simple. It's foreclosuresecrets.net. The book's $9.95. And when they purchase the book, it's usually shipped to them in like 2 to 3 days. They also, when they purchase the book, they get the digital version of it in their email inbox immediately, so they can start reading it right away. So if you're interested in just learning about how it works and how I do it, but you're not really ready for coaching yet, then just go to foreclosuresecrets.net. You can buy the book, get the email download right away. If you listen to the podcast and you're interested in the coaching, then just go to foreclosuresecrets.net/talk, foreclosuresecrets.net/talk, and you'll be taken to a link where you can book a call, a strategy session with someone on my team, and we can kind of go over the details and just make sure we're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for us and you're someone that we can help. And that's how the process starts with that.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Marty.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you for listening to our podcast today, brought to you by Bonavest Capital. We would really appreciate it if you can go to iTunes right now and leave a rating and written review. Also, please don't forget to subscribe so you can always get the latest episodes. You can also connect with us on Facebook, How Did They Do It Real Estate. We'd love to hear your feedback and any topics that you're interested in for future episodes. Lastly, to learn more about us, you can go to bonavestcapital.com and fill out the Contact Us page so you can speak to us directly. Nothing on the show should be considered as specific personal advice. Please consult your legal, tax, and real estate professionals for individualized advice.